Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Kung Fu Conversations. Today we have martial artist, translator, Joseph Crandall. Welcome, Joseph.
Hi.
So we usually start these out by asking if you could give us some information about yourself, about your origin story and how you got into martial arts and sort of how that led to your translation work.
Okay. Well, I started in college just doing an eclectic system of Southern Shaolin under a guy named Steve Bonneau, and fell in love with it. Did a lot of research. The college had a fairly extensive martial arts library, and from what I was reading, it sort of was pointing me in the direction of the internals. I figured, Taiji you can get just about anywhere, so I started hunting down the Bagua and the Xingyi, and stumbled upon Peter Rawlson's school in Oakland. And I was with him for about 9.5 years. I was one of his senior instructors there for a while. And at the same time, I ran across a guy named Jerry Allen Johnson. So most of my Bagua comes from Jerry Allen Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Simultaneously, my older brother was starting Bagua with John Ng in Kentucky. So it was kind of interesting that, just independently of each other, we stumbled on Bagua and both became pretty good with the Bagua stuff. Along the way, it's like anybody that came to town, I would study with. Fu Shuyun was in for a weekend seminar. My older brother had moved to Seattle and was studying under a guy named Zhang Jia, so I brought him down for a number of seminars. I was in Oakland at the time. Let's see, who else? S.T. Ying, this old guy. I had been hearing about this old guy teaching Bagua at a Chinese church in Berkeley somewhere, and I spent like 3 years trying to hunt him down before I finally found him. He learned Bagua in the 1920s, what he would say back when it was used for fighting. But he was 90 when I got to him. So I spent about 3 years working with him. That was a lot of fun. Who else? Bits and pieces to help round out my stuff with Mike Sigmund and Dan Harden, Don Anjay. I wouldn't call any of them my teachers, but they would, drop bits of information that sort of rounded out my understanding of what I needed to do with my body in doing the internal martial arts.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me. If we go back to the teacher that you spent a lot of time was, sort of hunting down. What was his name? I'm sorry.
S.T. Ying.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
No, it was Mr. Ying.
Yeah.
What was the training like? What was sort of a typical class for you?
Oh, for studying with him, it was we would be at his apartment, and there was a community room. We would go down there, and we just sort of walk circle, do the palm changes. He had these Jibung exercises, kind of like rolling a ball in the air, and he'd stand there doing it. He'd go to sleep doing that, and a senior student would finally yell, "Mr. Ying, we're getting tired. Let's do something else." And afterwards, we would go up to his apartment and have tea, and we could ask him any question we wanted. He couldn't hear at that point, so he had to kind of write things down. And to this day, I kick myself thinking like, well, I should have asked him this. I should have asked him this, mainly about training in the 1920s. But those things just didn't happen. So it's all kind of hindsight.
Yeah.
But he did recognize something in me and treated me differently from most of the students. The class was like Friday afternoon after work. Everybody's tired. And I would watch the people, and they get kind of sloppy in how they're holding their postures and things. And I thought, okay, I can get sloppy too. Now, Mr. Ying would run across the room, furious, grab my hands, yank him into the proper position. So it's like, no, I get no special treatment.
I always find that type of training, sort of in retrospect, is some of my favorite. You know, just the amount of discipline or the amount of attention that somebody had to, give me in order to help me progress and show me like the amount of detail that was actually there.
Oh yeah, that's I've been fairly lucky. Most of my teachers were generous that way. And quite freely giving. Is like, no, you need to do it this way. There's a little trick you can do it and makes it a little bit better.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And so, was there any other place in your martial arts journey where you maybe weren't studying Ba Gua or you weren't studying Xingyi? I'm sure you were still practicing it, but you had some other type of martial arts that maybe captured your attention sort of later on?
Oh, well, yeah, like I mentioned before we started, I've been doing Filipino martial arts, 3 different styles lately. The Kombatan, which I would kind of make it analogous to Northern Shaolin. The Escabodan, which is a evolution of Serrata, which a little bit more like Bagua. And the Blentawak, which is very Xingyi-esque. My Blentawak teacher is actually, he studied the Bagua with me years ago, then left to find this other teacher. Then I, looking for a Filipino martial arts, I just recently moved to Napa where my student lived, and so we started practicing together. And cool. It's kind of like relearning all over again. It's like, oh yeah, you do this. Oh, I remember doing that way back when. It's like how you move the body, how you coil the body, how it springs into action. Very nicely fits in with the Balintawak. And the Escabodan is, I got into that as I was working at Bayer Pharmaceutical, and one of the supervisors there, unbeknownst to me, was a Escabodan master. And overhearing some conversations with him, we started talking about martial arts, and he got into saying, well, I'm very interested in the internals, and I'm thinking, I'm interested in the Filipino martial arts. So we started sharing. Looking at him, he already had about 95% of what I would want to see in an internal martial artist. So it was just a matter of tweaking. We'll do this, and let me show you this. And, he was doing everything I wanted to see.
Wow, that's cool. Out of the internal martial arts, do you have a favorite?
Oh, Bagua, definitely. That's the... what did I call it? Bagua's the wife, Xingyi's the mistress, and Taiji, that's the girl down the road that I'll see occasionally.
I laugh because I've said something very similar before too. Because Bagua's my favorite as well. So, when you were learning like any of the Chinese systems, were you learning weapons as well? Was that part of the focus? Was that a primary focus?
Well, the Shaolin stuff, we're doing the typical weapons. With Ralston, all he did was the Taiji sword, so I got the gen work in with him. Jerry Johnson, sword, staff, deerhorn knives, but mostly it was just routines. It's not until you get to Filipino stuff, now you got a stick in your hand and someone's trying to crack your head open, that it starts to get real.
Sure.
And a lot of the interesting things from the internals that don't make sense empty-handed, when you have a stick in your hand, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is everywhere. It's like Hung Chuan. in my early days, any Xingyi master I ran across, is I asked, well, explain Hung Chuan. Hung Chuan doesn't make sense. It's hardly useful empty-handed. Or if they're doing applications, I look at that and it's like, no, that's not it.
Right.
But a stick in your hand, whether it's a long stick, a staff, a spear, or a short stick, or even a sword, Hung Chuan is everywhere.
Yeah, I can see that being a fundamental piece of, once you have that weapon, that is sort of extension of the hand, that shape makes more sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And as far as Ba Gua goes, what would you say your main style of Ba Gua is? Is it like more of a Chengting Hua style, or is it Zheng Zhong Chao, or is it Gao, or there's lots of different kinds?
Mostly Chengting Hua. I've done a little bit of the Yin Fu. Some of the stuff like Mr. Ying, his Ba Gua comes from Liu Dequan.
Oh, wow.
But what he did wasn't teaching the straight line stuff. It was just, circular things that looked kind of odd. Ralston's Ba Gua, I'm not certain, where he got his stuff. So the lineage is kind of shaky.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the stuff from Jerry Johnson, his main thing was Zhongrong Jiao, but he also did the Sun Lutang and a couple others. So he was very eclectic in what he was collecting. But I think I like the flavor of Chengting Hua more so than the Yin Fu stuff I see. So the large frame Yin Fu stuff, like a Jin Bao. That's the stuff. I look at that as okay. It's good. Not my style. Not for me. I look at the small frame stuff like He Jin Han in Taiwan, and I just love that. But it's like I'm a little too old for that. I should have started learning that when I was a little kid. So the Chengting Hua stuff tends to suit my taste the best. I like the artistic style of it. I like the flavor of it.
Mm-hmm. And when as far as your Xingyi goes, did you have most of your exposure through like Hebei, or did you have some Shaanxi, or was there kind of some variety in there, or did you have kind of one main system that you ended up studying?
Mainly Hebei, and mainly Sun style. But I did do work with Li Tailiang, and he taught me the squatting monkey and the 5 elements and the Dai style. And I often forget about him, but he's that squatting monkey. That's one of those little keys that when you get it down, boy, that magnifies your power. It's just like understanding that, getting that to work in the body, getting that to work so that it extends out to your limbs. There's nothing like that in the world. So I start all new students, doing that. They don't understand. I say, just keep doing it. It's going to make sense down the line. But I do like the Shaanxi styles. And as I get older, I tend to personally be more smaller frame, like the Chi style. But the forms, the routines, and everything, they're all based on the Hebei style.
Right. There's a lot of overlap and similarities between those two. And so along the same lines, that's one of the questions I was going to ask. Are you currently teaching? Do you have students these days?
I have a few students. I don't have a regular class. Again, most of what I want to teach really needs to be done one-on-one, hands-on stuff.
Yep.
I've taught big classes, and when you've got 30 people in a class, the people in the back aren't getting what needs to be got. So, I don't advertise, but I don't turn people away if they show up at the door.
And if you were going to bring in a sort of an average student, maybe who has some kind of martial arts background, I know you had just said you maybe would start with the squatting monkey type exercises, but what other types of progressions would you take them through?
Well, it would depend. If I had a person coming to me that already had a martial arts background, I would just take what they've got and just sort of transform it. It's like, okay, you punch like this as well. If you drop your scapula over here, you twist your leg over this way, it makes this punch a little bit better. And so I would just work with what he had, unless they really, they came to me saying, I want to learn Ba Gua. Then, start them walking the circle. You start them with the G-bun exercises, the teacup exercises, things like that. Ralston had what he called principles courses, which is a whole 16 classes on how to do the body for doing internal martial arts. That stuff would go in there really quickly.
That's cool.
And then it would depend. I've had some students that all they want to do is learn all my forms, and I had learned, dozens of routines over the years. But it's like, if you can't do the first one right well, then I'm really disinclined to show you anything else. I need to see the right body structure, and if I can't stand looking at you, it's like, nah. You're wasting my time.
I know exactly how you feel. That's the other reason I laugh along.
Well, I had one guy, I was judging at a tournament in Berkeley, and the guy came out there and he did just abysmal routine. And I kind of whispered over to one of the co-judges, I wonder who his teachers are. And, this judge had no shame. She just bursts out, well, who's your teachers? And he goes, oh, I'm somebody from Arizona. Then he points at me and he goes, and your videos. And I was appalled. And I had two videos at that point, and I just took them off the out of sale. No more. I can't be responsible for someone looking that bad in public.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds like a wise choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you, in your current class and in the way you teach, do you usually start teaching weapons sooner, or do you wait until the students reach a certain threshold of integration, or is it, they need to have something in particular that you're looking for?
In fact, weapons would come pretty quick, mainly because it's, I'm about the real life martial arts rather than just, dancing in the park. So if I'm showing an application and they start flinching, it's like, okay, they need to get used to having things flying at their face. So then it's a great time to get the Screamer sticks out. And it's like, okay, just learn how to block this thing, and I'm going to be throwing this stick at your face so that you get used to having something flying at your head. And it also depends on, how interested the student is in it. So if they're like, really, I want to do the staff, then okay, we'll work with the staff. If they want to do the sword, we can do the sword kind of stuff. If they want to do the spear, I got to send them to someone else because I'm not very good at the spear.
And if for say a new student who comes into your class, do you teach like if they want to do Ba Gua, I think you said that you could put them into a Ba Gua curriculum, and if they wanted to do Xingyi, could they do like a Xingyi curriculum? Do you sort of teach them side by side? Okay.
It's what they want. I teach everything. I don't do a Ba Gua class or a Xingyi class. They would come to me and says, I want to learn Ba Gua, fine. And if they see someone doing Xingyi and they get interested in that, says, okay, fine. Or some of the things like the squatting monkey, even though that's Xingyi, that applies to all the arts. So you're going to learn the squatting monkey regardless. The teacups is mainly a Ba Gua thing, but that applies to all the arts. You're going to learn the teacups regardless. And so then, it just depends on the flavor of the art that appeals to them. Though I did have one young lady that had started off with Xingyi with another person and came to me, and I'm looking at her going like, you just don't have the mass and the muscle to, pull this off in a fight. So let's do the Ba Gua instead. So we did that. Just for her safety.
Sure. And yeah, as a follow-up on that, I was going to ask, and is that something that you would typically do, sort of evaluate the student against what they want, and then knowing the arts, sort of maybe try to steer them in one way or one direction or another?
Yes. So, if it's something as generic as Taiji is like, well, if you want to, there's no biggie. You can be any size for that. It's not a big deal. But if you want to do Xingyi and go in a tournament and fight that way, then, if you're not conditioned for it, I'll probably steer you a different direction. I'd never say no if that was, what their heartfelt desire was, is like, sure. Because that enthusiasm makes up for a lot.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. It really does. So do you teach Taiji as well?
I do. Peter Ralston was my major Taiji teacher. And so I'll teach a version of his short form and the long form that he had learned.
Was that Yang style?
It's a Yang style, yeah. It's a drift. So he studied with William C.C. Chen in New York, who studied with Chen Mancheng. So it's kind of through there. The long form comes from Wang Jack Man, and I'm not sure of the lineage of it. I've never seen another version quite like what they're doing. I learned Wu style from S.T. Ging, but that was kind of like, just show up to class and kind of run through the form with him because I was more interested in his Bagua than anything else. And somewhere along the line, I learned Sun style, but I rarely bring that one out.
And these days, do you find that with people coming in the door or new people who are interested in the arts, are they sort of gravitating towards one thing in particular?
Most of the current ones are there for the energetics. Okay. And I don't know how woo-woo you want to get with this.
It's all good.
Okay. With Ralston's principles course, and then he had another course called Function, where you're dealing with another person. There's a lot of working with energy, listening to energy, being sensitive to it. And that kind of broadens out into, being more sensitive to the world around you, not just in a martial arts case. And a lot of my current students, that's kind of more of what they're looking for. They're working to work on that energy development, spiritual development. And just the way I teach, even if they didn't have a clue about that realm, is just I would adjust a posture and say, okay, feel what this feels like, right? Feel what this feels like. Don't think about it. Feel with it. The more they're getting into that feeling, and with Taiji, particularly the push hands, is like, listen to what I'm doing. Feel what I'm doing. That starts to expand the energy, your sense of awareness. And it generally it moves on to greater and more wonderful things.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I wanted to pivot and ask you, how did you get into translation?
So Peter Ralston had this Chinese language martial arts book. It was Zhang Rongjiao's Mitsong book. And it was always open to a particular page sitting on his desk. And one day he just pointed at the picture and said, what's he doing? What do you see in the picture? He was trying to get me to see what the energy of that Zhongrong had in his posture.
Mm-hmm.
And all I was thinking, like, where did you get this book? And so he mentioned, these bookstores in Chinatown. So I made a beeline. I bought every single Chinese language book I could find in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking at this one book, and the person's posture was facing away from the camera. So you're looking at his back, and his hands were hidden. And so for a year, I'm like, what's he doing with his hands? And I didn't read Chinese, so I didn't know. And so finally, after waiting, I'm thinking, like, someone's going to translate this, right? And it's like, no, I got to do it. So I went and picked up a dictionary and a grammar and started working on translating the book to, just so I could see what the guy was doing with those hands.
That's a great story.
Now, that sort of bleeds into is I met one of Jerry Johnson's students. He came to visit Ralston School, and we were talking. And he had the book of the Zhongrong Zhao's book. And I hadn't seen that. And so he says, yeah, I can get you a copy. We had talked about translating stuff. And he says, if you want to translate it, my teacher would appreciate that. But I said, sure. I got the copy. I translated it for him. And in the process, I'm thinking, like, well, if I'm interested in the book and Jerry Johnson's interested in the book, other people will be interested also. And that's where I started to not just doing a translation of the book, but actually put it together in a volume that someone could have on their desk, adding the pictures, doing a lot of editing of the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those Chinese books, the printing is haphazard. And so you have to take a picture of the picture, open it up with paint, and just start pixel by pixel filling in the lines that were too faded to see.
Oh, wow.
So typically, we take about a year to do a book, year and a half sometimes if it's a bigger book. So I did one that the universe is telling me, don't do it. But Robert W. Smith had said, this is one of the best Bagua books in the world. And I thought, okay, I got my hands on it. I'm going to translate it. If it's one of the best, it deserves to be translated. It took me 10 years to translate that one.
Wow.
It's a skinny little book, and it was just not worth translating. But I was being pig-headed, and it was like, I'm going to do it anyway. So, yeah, 10 years of it's just painful work. Wow. Sometimes I'd open the page, and one character, I could get it, one character done, and then I got to put it down again. But like I mentioned earlier with the listening to the universe around you, when you listen to these clues, it's like the universe is telling me, don't do that. If I pick another book off the shelf, done in a year. It's very easy. So there are these clues. If something's easy, you're supposed to be doing it. If something's like hitting a brick wall, it's like, yeah, you might want to try something else. And I noticed that just in general life, more and more, it could be, which store do I want to go to? It's just like,
sure.
All of a sudden I can't find parking to the place I want to go to. So I said, okay, forget it. I drive down the street and there's a new store that's even better. I would never have seen the new store if I had, if I had insisted on parking at the old place.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely with the books, it's that way.
And were most of these books, were they in simplified Chinese, or were they in sort of classical Chinese, or?
Oh, it's a bit of both.
Okay.
So the copy of Sun Lutang's Bagua book is in the classical.
Okay.
And with no punctuation. So, being self-taught, this was really difficult. At the time, I was working at Abbott Laboratories in Santa Clara. And there was one of the engineers was a guy from Shanghai, and he had a report to write. So he came to me and asked me to help him with his articles because and aren't in Chinese. So I looked at him and said, sure, but you're going to help me with some Chinese.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we sat down and were working, and there was one really difficult chapter trying to figure out what he was saying. And another guy wandered by, and he was from Taiwan. And he said, oh, I heard you're working on Chinese translation. And I kind of looked at it and looked at the translation and said, oh, no, you're wrong. And I says, what? He says, you got to read this out loud. There's a rhyme to it. That's where your punctuation is. And he starts reading it out loud. It's like, da, 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 da. That's the punctuation. Right. Da, 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 da. And it changed the meaning of the whole paragraph that we had been working on.
Wow.
And so I was fortunate that, I was able to kind of coerce the one guy, and the other guy was just curious and had a classical education and just liked to laugh at the modern education of the people in mainland.
Huh. So in translating, what are some of the difficulties that you've had in terms of, trying to, like, I think you illustrated a one right there that I thought was excellent. It's without the punctuation, it's the rhyme that begins to help form the thoughts and the ideas within the writing. And did you come across any sort of Marshall specific terms that were difficult in translating? I've seen other translations, or occasionally I'll do sort of the Google Translate thing if there's a block of Chinese text and I want to understand what it says, and it'll return some of the most nonsensical things. And I know that there's a particular character in there that may be for, like a part of the circle, or there's something specific that the writing is trying to get to in terms of meaning and the layers there. But do you think that some of that gets lost in translation if you don't have the martial arts background?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's kind of maybe not important. So, for instance, in like the names of some of the movements in Bagua, there's one. I'm not going to say. Well, Tyrant King lifts up the tripod would be the direct translation of the four characters, and some people would be happy to leave it at that. But actually, the Tyrant King, which is the Bo Wang, was kind of a feudal lord that was on the border of the Zhou dynasty kingdoms. And because the Zhou dynasty got so large and communication between the capital and these outskirts of the country were so far, communication was bad. So the lords on the outsides of the outskirts of the kingdom started to act as their own imperial rulers, and so the Bo Wang was the title for that level of nobility, the people on the borders, and then offering the lifting of the tripod is a ceremonial rule that only the emperor was supposed to do. So by the Bo Wang lifting the tripod, they're showing that they're in rebellion against the emperor.
Wow.
So that little bit of information kind of gives some flavor to what you're doing. But it's kind of, if you're not a historian or interested in Chinese culture, it doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything necessarily to the technique. But it gives you that little bit of information that I like. I had arguments with other translators. No, we should just leave it this way. And I'm thinking like, no, we should supply a little bit more context. But that's, going to end up just being a difference in translator style.
Sure.
But there are different things. Like I was working in another company, and one of my employees had been a medical doctor in China. And so like, oh, great. So I can ask him questions on Chinese occasionally. And there was one piece where they were referring to a bone in the lower leg or the foot that needed to be kicked. And it wasn't in any of my dictionaries, and I've got several. And so I'm thinking like, oh, okay, Hung knows, he's a doctor. So I went and says, what is this? And he looks at it and he just got furious.
Oh, wow.
He says, this is not a bone. I know every bone in the human body. This is not a bone. I'm going, yeah, it is, because we're going to kick it.
Right.
It was something specific either to the region where the author was from or to their particular style that isn't in standard Chinese medical dictionary. So when you run across those things, it's like best guess.
Right. Right.
Then sometimes it is how the Chinese will structure the term can be kind of convoluted when looking at it from a Western point of view. Mm-hmm. There's a little text for Taiji called Budiu Buding. And so it's kind of like don't throw it away, but don't bang on it type of a thing. And it's like it's awkward to translate into English adequately until it's kind of struck me as a term that Peter Rawson would use all the time is stick and yield. So Budu Buding is just stick and yield.
Mm-hmm. And I think that last thing you just said is a great example of this question that I'm about to ask. And so do you think that understanding the Chinese language and the culture helps you with your practice of the martial arts itself?
The culture will give it flavor. And again, mm-hmm. I love history. So for me personally, those things make a difference. It doesn't make a difference to functionally how I use the art. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the language is yes, and the better you understand it, the better, because when you go back and read the Ba Gua songs or you're reading the Taiji classics, there's stuff in there that if you don't quite understand what they're saying, you're not getting the communication, you're not getting the transmission, and so you're not getting the skill.
Right.
And they could be, again, Chinese writing is rather laborious, so that they're going to truncate things, they're going to abbreviate things. And so, you can read something and it's like, okay, I think I know what it means. And then you get someone from the system, like Zhang Jie would come in and say, oh, no, you left out like 3 of the characters that are assumed. And this is what it actually means. It's like, oh, okay.
Huh. Right. How do you decide which books you wanted to translate? Well, is there a process?
It's mainly the ones that I'm personally interested in. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that sort of jump off the shelf into my hand. And, let's see, I've done about 30 books. And the number of books on my shelf is in the hundreds. So, it's like, these are never going to get done. And then I'm sure you're familiar with Brennan Translates. Mm-hmm. Oh, he was a godsend. Because he started putting out all the books that were on my list to do. And it's like, oh, I don't have to do this. Oh, I don't have to do this. And he has a very good understanding of the Chinese history and the classics, so that when there's an obscure reference, it's like he knows where to find it in the old texts and things. And it's like, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. In fact, I pretty much haven't done any serious translating since he came online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorites out of the things that you've translated?
Uh, Zhongrong Chao's Xingyi Muchuan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a lot of value out of that one for sure.
Okay, yeah, because I remember when I first put it out, and somebody online somewhere is like, wasn't really bad mouthing it, but sort of dismissing the whole idea of reading the books, saying, well, you can't learn from a book. And I realized, well, okay, you didn't read the book. You just looked at the pictures. Because if you actually read the book, there's little things in there that if you don't stop and think about what he's saying, you're missing a lot. Particularly early when he's in there saying, like, well, it looks like Bong Chuan, but it's really Hung Chuan. Or it looks like Hung Chuan, but it's really Chuan Chuan. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, what is he talking about here? And then some of the stuff like 3 tips. People don't understand the 3 tips. You understand the 3 tips, you magnify your power. And I'll put people in the position so, okay, hit me like you normally hit me. Okay, boom. It's like, okay, that's halfway decent. Now that I'll line up their 3 tips, it says, now hit me. And boom. Now they knocked me across the room. It's like, see what you can do when you follow these little rules that are in there that they're putting out. So, yeah, that one probably my favorite. But the one I'm proudest of was actually getting Sun Lu Tang out there in English for the first time.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the reason that I got interested in your work was because there just wasn't a lot of resources, especially back then when I first started training, and to come across your manuals, these translations, it was great because there was nowhere online that I don't speak Chinese. My teacher spoke Chinese, but it was, I couldn't ask him to translate things for me. I would occasionally, but like we've illustrated here, I think it's difficult and it can be challenging. And so, I just wanted to say thank you because, and that's the reason I asked you to come on, because, it made such a big impact on me to have those sorts of resources. And, I hope that other people out there, will, get exposure to you and those translations as well. And
I kind of hope that it encourages other people to translate. So, I mean, there's a few of us out there. I think Brennan at this point has done the majority of the work. I've got a bunch, a couple people put one out here and there. But like I say, I've got a wall of books that all should be translated. And I don't think it's going to get done in my lifetime. So hopefully someone else will take up the torch and continue.
I wanted to ask you about the translation. And did you speak Chinese before you started translating, or was it something that happened sort of concurrently, like as you were?
I don't speak Chinese now. Okay. So I have been. I do little online classes. Continually. So this has been going on since the 1980s. So I know, I can hear enough that I get in trouble because Li Taileon was giving a lecture, and the translator was not a martial artist, and I could hear the particular Bagua jargon being mentioned. And so I would say, oh, no, that means this. Oh, no, that means this. Oh, no. Then the translator's getting mad at me. It's like, all right, you want to translate? No, I can't do good enough job on everything else. I can hear the things that I'm interested in.
Right.
So here and there, pick up a few things is like, when I was introduced to Li Taileon, I said, oh, hey, my name's Joe Crandall. And he points to his elbow and goes, Joe? And I go, yes, Joe. Little things like that is okay. I know how to pronounce my name in Chinese. Joe. I point at the elbow.
I wanted to ask, you know, as you go through the translation process, was there, you know, some people I've heard doing commentary on when they translate or things that they have translated, say that it gives them sort of an insight into the person who wrote it. And I can't remember in particular who I was thinking of. I think it was more of a academic type translation of maybe a religious text or an academic text, but they had mentioned that, you know, that the material as they were translating it really started to give them a sense maybe of who this person was in the broad brushstrokes. And I was wondering, is that something that you have ever experienced, you know, as you've translated all these different manuals from different authors and, you know, different martial artists over the last century?
Not really, though. There are definitely different writing styles. So it's like when I'm doing Zhang Ranjiao, I was like, oh, okay. I kind of got a sense of, you know, how he's doing his stuff, so I can get into that flow. Then you jump to somebody else, it's like, okay, I've got to sort of reset my brain because the way he's writing is a little bit different. And then Hejin Han in Taiwan, he put out a couple of books, and I stare at those, and it's like I just can't wrap my head around what he's saying, because he's writing in a, you know, for me, a very difficult way. So, you know, I look at his stuff, and it's like I haven't a clue how to even approach this stuff. Yeah. But for most things, when it's just like, you know, put your left foot here, swing your right hand over this way, not a lot of personality in that. It's a little bit different if it was, you know, reading like a novel or, you know, a philosophical treatise or something like that.
And so, is that something that you have interest in, you know, sort of outside of the martial arts world, doing any kind of translation from Chinese?
Not really. It's laborious. And if you don't have a really, well, again, it's like most of my translations is martial arts, so there's a jargon involved. So if I was going to go over, say, to a novel, then I've got to sort of reset. Okay, they don't use quite this terminology. They're going to use this kind of a flow of the language. I could do it, but again, it can be time consuming. And so doing these little martial arts books where I get all day long, I can just do the simple stuff. And then tomorrow I'll try and work on that introduction where they're just talking. So I think it's more of a laziness on my part.
That's fair. That sounds like a lot of work. So if you, I know, and well, let me ask this. So in translating all of these manuals over the years, have you translated, manuals by the same author? So I just wanted to ask that to start with, and then I have a follow-up question.
Oh yeah. So like, Zhang Ranjiao, I did, 2 of his Xingyi books and his, Ba Gua book. And I have probably 6 other books by him sort of on the to-do list. Other people, let's see. For publishing, that's the only one. I mean, I have Liu Xinghan's 2 books. And just for my own stuff, I've translated several chapters, but not enough to publish the whole book, type of thing.
And is that something you sort of you do on a regular basis? As you're looking through these manuals, you may see something that, grabs your attention, your interest. And so you go ahead and make the effort to maybe translate small sections or chapters.
Yeah. So there's more of that these days.
Mm-hmm.
And though, what was it? The guy's name? Zhu Baojian, Yin style practitioner in Beijing, through one of his students had reached out and asked me to translate his book. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, well, let me see. So I already had the book. So I took just a chapter on the differences between Yin style and Trunk style Bagua. And I said, okay, so I translated that and I looked at that, and the text was exactly the same. So it was like, there's no difference according to my writing.
Huh.
So that was enough to say, no, I'm not gonna. I can't go forward with this project. You'll have to find someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, I've done a lot of magazine articles I thought would be interesting, and so you get halfway through it and you realize, no, this is not worth completing. There's just nothing of value. I don't know if you remember the old Inside Kung Fu magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if you actually go back and critically read, 90% of the articles in that magazine don't say a thing. And, in the old days, anything Bagua, if it had the name on it, I would cut it out, buy it, whatever.
Sure.
And recently, because I just moved from to a new place, and we're kind of downsizing, and I'm going through all these things, and like, yeah, not worth saving, not worth saving, not worth saving. So I, trash cans full of things that it's like just not worth it. So it's you look at the title of the little article, and it's like, okay, I'm kind of interested just by what the title says, but then when you get into the meat of it, it's like fluff or just really nothing.
Mm-hmm. I know you had mentioned, I think is it Paul Brennan from Brennan Translations?
Yeah, Paul Brennan. Yes. Uh-huh.
So in general, maybe even outside of, Chinese martial arts, do you have, somebody that you sort of look up to in the translation world? Somebody who, you're like, okay, I like the way this person produces translations.
Well, Paul Brennan will be the top one.
Mm-hmm.
The others, usually pretty good. My brain's not going to let me do the names anymore. The gal up in Vancouver did Zhang's book.
Andrea Falk.
Yes, Andrea Falk.
Mm-hmm.
So, she, reading through one of her translations, and I sent her an email saying, well, why did you use this word for this character, type of a thing?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a discussion. We had to agree to disagree. And I take it down to, okay, it's just that her Canadian English is a little bit different than my American English. And so personally, I would not have used the word. But she did, good work. And I always, and this is an influence from Peter Rawson, is he's always said, read as many translations of the author that you can find, because everyone's going to have a different take. So when people, call me up and want to buy, Zhang Jiao's Ba Gua book, I say, okay. And also there's these other ones that you should also take a look at. So I'll freely say, read these other ones also. You're going to have different insights.
Yeah, that's cool.
A lot of times the only difference is my style of using English language versus somebody else's. In most cases, most of the translations I've seen out there are pretty good.
Do you have anything new you're working on?
Yeah. So
you don't have to let the cat out of the bag if you don't want to, but.
Oh, no, it's okay. But I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, because, until it's actually done, it's not done type of a thing.
Sure.
But the Dai style Xingyi master, Dai Ying Hai, his son put out a book on Dai style Xingyi, and it is one of the most detailed, exquisite books that I've seen. And so I just started doing the translation of that. I don't know how long it's going to take, because that one's got a lot of pictures and diagrams that I've got to go in and edit the Chinese captions and put in English captions and things like that.
Right.
But once it's done, that I don't think it would be a very important book for English, any internal martial arts students, because it's going to have a detailed on how that Dantian works in Dai style Xingyi.
Wow.
It's going to be amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
When I got my hands on that book, I was just like, oh my God, this is one of the best things I've seen in a long time.
Oh, that's cool. I was going to ask, in terms of translating, sort of internal martial arts terminology from Chinese to English, sort of how closely do you feel like you can get?
I think fairly for my own understanding of how internal stuff works, I think I can get fairly close. There are some things that I probably will refuse to translate. And what I mean is, like, say the 5 fists in Xingyi. I'm not going to call it splitting fist. I'm going to call it Pichuan. Simply learn it as Pichuan. What Pichuan means in real life is much more than splitting fist. So I would be limiting the meaning of the term by giving it an English translation. That doesn't take a whole paragraph. And so there are things like that. And in my translations, I think I'll put little notes like, you're just going to have to learn this term in Chinese, because, otherwise you're going to be, talking for an hour in order to explain it to a student.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask you, when you're doing translations, do you have any like pet peeves? Anything that just, you continually come across in the translation process that just,
Yeah. Certain characters that I should remember but don't. And I can't figure out what the radical is, so I can look it up in the dictionary.
Sure.
I spent probably 20 minutes yesterday trying to hunt down the character for county. And it's like, I can't find it. And I'm remembering having the same problem before. I couldn't find it. So, I did a lot of, if I take this word and put it in the computer to translate it into this word, then take it back and translate it to this word, maybe get it over to this word, and finally find it. But it's like my memory not being able to remember some of these characters and having to look them up constantly is, probably the thing I kick myself about the most.
Sure.
And I'll remember which page on the dictionary it's at, but I won't remember what the definition of the character is.
In terms of the translation, do you have difficulty finding? Well, we talked a little bit earlier about context and it's kind of how much that context can lend itself to understanding the term or the translated term. Yeah. And I was wondering, and I have no Chinese ability, so I'll just preface this with that. I know that there is a fair amount of, say, in like Chung style Bagua, like each one of the postures has kind of a poetic name, like, the wild geese come out as a flock, or, so those sorts of things. But and this is understanding that came from my teacher and my lineage. So, I just kind of wanted to put this out there and run it by you. That those poetic terms are sort of not necessarily a metaphor. I don't think that's the right word for sort of an action, or
sometimes like while goose leaves the flock, it kind of gives it that sense of like reaching out, going out type of a thing. Some of them have double meanings, like conceal the flower beneath the leaves.
Right.
John was telling me that there's I forget which character it is, but there's a homonym, and it talks about it's a stinky armpit. And you're like, okay.
Oh, that's good.
But having the poetic name, I think, helps with the memory of the movement, because Peter Rawlinson would create these techniques to use off of the push hands routine. And, we would have them, okay, if you're going to go for your blue belt, whatever, you've got to learn all these techniques. And they would just be run-ons of turn left, go up, go down, grab his arm, blah, 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 blah. And it would, we take forever. And these never stuck in my mind. And even though, I was his dummy for developing most of these things, I knew them all like the back of my hand. And they get up there and say, okay, Joe, do blah, 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 blah. And I just look at him with a blank look and like, what? And they go, this one. Oh, yeah, I know that one. I just can't never remember the name. You give it a poetic name, while a goose leaves the flock. It's like, okay, that's simple name. I know what that is. I can do that. So it definitely helps that way.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of translating it, do you think that getting the sort of martial context is can it be easy? Can it be challenging? I suppose it depends on the term, but I wanted to get your take on that.
Oh, well, it's nice to know the martial applications, but sometimes there's maybe dozens for the same movement.
Sure.
And if you're not introduced to them, that could be a huge mystery. So Ralston never taught any applications for his Bagua. It was all, this is how the body moves. Then he would throw me to the senior Taiji people to beat up, and I would need to figure out how to move to not get beat up.
Right.
But then you would meet someone else and say, oh, you can do this with that move. Okay, cool. So now I've got that in my mind. I can do this particular. This is a great throw. Then you meet someone else and says, oh, guess what? You can do this with that exact same movement. Okay, it's either a different throw or maybe it's a joint technique. So every time you see somebody that has some skill with this and they're showing you something, my eyes, they go wide open. It's like, okay, there's now a different flavor to that technique just because I can see that we're going to move this way and do this other technique. So I think the more techniques that you can learn off of these movements, the better understanding, the better it will then translate. Maybe you never learned a technique for, the 10,000 arrows sweep the sky. But it's like, if you have experience with a lot of other things, you can learn that, oh, maybe I can do this with that. Maybe I can turn it this way and make it work. Either as a throw or as a joint lock or as, guess what? I can kick here and things like that. But Ralston was mostly about, the functionality. So if your body is set up so that you can do any technique, right? You have the proper body structure, proper body alignment, and then with his function course and how to deal with another person. So you're looking at things like leading and following and borrowing, joining, those things. He kind of said, those are pretty much all you need. And if you're very skilled at that, your opponent typically makes an error and loses the fight because they're not doing something properly.
Mm-hmm. And,
yeah.
No, I was. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I remember one time is I was working with a classmate, and I was just working on following. So it's like I just follow. Next thing you know, he's flying away. Is because I had the proper structure, and I was following him, and he ran into that structure at some point and then just bounced off. So it's like, oh, okay. I didn't have a technique that did that. It was simply I was just doing the art and following, and his mistake caused him to get bounced off of me. It was nothing I did particular, other than follow.
Right. So with Peter, do you know if those, so you were saying that he had some sort of principle-based classes that he would teach up front. Were those things that he had created, or were they things that he had learned and then sort of put together, or?
Well, they were descriptions of what he did. Now, some of the exercises might have come from different disciplines, but the genius in was that he put these things together. So it's like, okay, today we're working on relaxation, and here are all these ways we're going to work on relaxation. And here today we're going to work on grounding, and these are the ways that you're going to discover what grounding is. Today we're working on alignment, and so most of these, I think, he created. I don't know where all of them are, but sometimes I'll demonstrate something and then someone will say, oh, that's right out of Feldenkrais. And okay, so Peter must have got it from Feldenkrais. That's fine. Other things, is like, I'll show some, and it's, people are like just blown away. It's like, where did that come from? It come from Ralston. Must have, he examined how he would do the arts, and it says, this is what I do, and here's how to get there. And the genius is if you do the exercises in those courses, you'll get the skills that he's telling you that they will develop. And it's kind of the core of what I do. And even though, I left Ralston in 1988, and 35 years later, I go back to the stuff and it's like, oh, okay, now I have a different understanding of what he was talking about. Maybe deeper than he was expressing back then, but it's definitely like, oh, I've kind of come full circle, where this was a basic thing that I needed. And now I'm looking at this going like, well, this is the very advanced thing when I'm dealing with my opponent. So I can't give enough credit for, those exercises that I did with him way back when.
Wow. That's cool. It's neat to hear, that it was so utilitarian, and it's still sort of serving its purpose and helping you grow as a martial artist as well.
Oh yeah,
that's really,
absolutely.
That's really cool. I was going to ask you, kind of going back to your teaching and how you teach, when do you usually start introducing like applications?
Pretty quick. Just because I like applications.
Just sure.
Yeah, I like to keep things fighty. And even if it's Taiji, it's like right off the bat, it's like, look, your very first movement, raise hands. I could snap your neck with this. And they were like, what? It's like, yeah, here's how it works. So I tend not to have students that are just in it for the calisthenics. So, as soon as I start showing applications, they're all kind of interested. And it helps too. It is like, if I'm going to do brush knee twist step in Taiji, it's like, well, you better be able to throw me on the ground with this, right? So we'll get the structure set up. It's not just this Floyd move with your hands moving in the air, but it's like, you need to be able to put me on the ground, and this is 200 pounds, and I'll be a good dummy for them. But it's like, I won't let them succeed if they're not got their structure correct. Right. So it's everything's got to be correct. And honestly, is when they start working with the proper body mechanics and the proper energy. One is it feels better, looks better, and often, because I don't do testing or ranks or anything like that. I always get a student saying, "Well, what belt am I?" And I go, "Well, okay. So you go down to this park in Oakland where all the Chinese folks are doing their Taiji in the morning, and you watch them, and you come back and you tell me what rank you are." And they all come back wide-eyed. It's like, "Oh, they're awful." It says, "Yeah."
Oh, that's good. I think that that was all the questions that I had.
Excellent.
Yeah. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. And, if you have, usually at the end of the podcast, we ask if there's anything that, you have that you want to plug, or anything, you have coming up, or you're putting out, or, any piece of advice that you want to leave for future practitioners. Yeah.
Oh, no, practice.
Yeah. That's always solid.
I'm currently in Napa, so if people want to come by visit, I'm definitely open to all that. There aren't enough good teachers in the world, so it's good to go out, meet different people, get different perspective. Yeah, train with as many people as you can.